Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I want to share with you 8 Halloween stories from deep in Appalachia, where the neighbors never really moved out. Out there, lanterns glow quietly through the fog, knocks echo after midnight, and folks still say, if you find a mask left on your porch, don't touch it. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have started not far from where you are. Now then, let's begin. The first morning I stepped onto the porch, I tasted the cold. Fog rolled down the ridge like poured milk, curling around the wooden railing and swallowing the old wind chimes that hadn't rung in years. Halloween was 4 days away, and yet, this place felt like it had already ended, a celebration no one invited me to. The porch still wore the leftovers of someone else's October. Splintered wooden pumpkins, a sagging string of lights, and a paper lantern so sun-faded it looked like a peeled onion. My name is Lena. I was 29 and fresh off a burnout from teaching middle school English. I moved into the cabin, thinking I'd finally write the novel I always said I would, tucked away where no one could find me. That morning, I stood with a broom in one hand and a mug of reheated gas station coffee in the other, trying to decide whether this place felt more like a beginning or an echo. That was the first time I saw the light, just past the tree line on the opposite ridge, where fog lapped at the base of an old pine like water at a dock. A flicker appeared. I thought it was a reflection at first, maybe a car turning on a road I hadn't noticed. But then it moved, gently, like someone walking with a lantern in hand. I didn't panic. I remember thinking it was kind of poetic. Someone else, like me, drawn to quiet places with no trick-or-treaters or doorbells. A neighbor, maybe, living even further off-grid than I was. Someone who still used lanterns for light. Back then, I just figured it was someone else chasing silence like me. I should have asked sooner who lived across that ridge. I should have known that just because a house looks empty doesn't mean it's abandoned. The second time I saw the lantern, I was brushing my teeth. It was standing still this time, halfway up the ridge, exactly where the fog was thickest. A small, round glow, just faint enough that I had to squint. I watched it until the taste of mint turned bitter in my mouth. I asked the mailman the next day, casually, like I wasn't already thinking about it every night. Hey, is there anyone living in the house over on the eastern hill? I said, like I didn't already know the answer. He shook his head slowly and said, nah, that place has been empty since last Halloween. Last guy up there was different. Used to wave that old lantern like it was a lighthouse. It is PN rallying. I laughed. Sort of. So it's empty now. And say, oh, yeah. Nobody's lived there since. There one. That night, I stayed up later than usual. Kept checking the window every few minutes. Just before midnight, I saw it again. The lantern. Now much closer, but not moving. It hung low, like it had been placed on the ground. The next morning, there was one hanging from my porch. I nearly dropped my coffee. It was the same shape, the same metal frame glass, same faint greenish tint. Only this one had a folded piece of paper tucked inside. The note said, asterisk, every year. I welcomed the new one. Asterisk. The handwriting was messy and childlike, like someone had never stopped writing the way they did in 3rd grade. I brought the lantern inside. I kept telling myself it was a prank, maybe some weird regional Halloween tradition, but I locked the door that night for the first time since moving in. Fog that thick shouldn't carry sound, but somehow, it did. Every night it pressed closer to the windows, and I kept waiting for something, for the footsteps I imagined, or the knock that hadn't come yet. The night before Halloween, I didn't sleep. It was just past 3 in the morning when I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. I sat up so fast I nearly tore the blanket. The sound was slow, deliberate, weight shifting across the old roof beams. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it might be an animal. A raccoon, maybe, or a branch scraping loose shingles. But then the steps stopped directly above my bedroom. I stood there holding my breath, listening. When I finally dared to open the window, the fog outside was pale and thick, swallowing everything except one thing: the lantern's light. It swayed just beyond the edge of the roof, revealing a tall figure climbing down the slope of shingles. His coat was dark, not shiny like a costume, but soaked with the kind of wet that comes from standing too long in fog. I slammed the window shut and stumbled back. My phone showed no signal. I tried to dial anyway, staring at the little spinning icon, as if wanting hard enough could pull a connection out of the mist. When I turned toward the living room, a paper mask was pressed against the glass from the outside, the kind children used to wear for parades. That was when I knew the house was not empty on either side of me. Someone had never left. I packed fast, the knife from the kitchen drawer, my phone, a flashlight, a jacket. The key turned once in the lock, then jammed. I did not bother to fix it. The back door gave a groan when I pushed it open, the sound muffled by the fog that waited for me outside. The lantern was there, halfway down the path, its light steady and low. I thought about running back inside, but then heard the creak of the porch boards behind me. So I ran forward instead, up the western trail that climbed toward higher ground. The earth was slick, the air full of wet pine and the sharp smell of rot. Branches tore at my sleeves. My breath sounded too loud. Every few seconds I thought I heard another breath that was not mine, following the rhythm just behind me. When I stumbled over a root and hit the ground, the taste of iron filled my mouth. I forced myself up, wiping my face with the back of my hand, and kept running. By the time I reached the clearing, my legs felt hollow. The lantern's glow still followed, weaving between trees like a slow heartbeat. Then I saw it, a small wooden shed leaning against a cluster of birch trees. I rushed inside and slammed the door, sliding the bolt into place. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, like old fruit left to rot. I crouched and looked through a split in the wall. The fog pressed close, but the light was still there. It moved side to side, then closer, until it reached the shed door. I held the knife tight, my whole arm trembling. The glow filled the cracks between the boards, painting the inside of the shed in pale gold. Then the light stopped moving. 3 knocks. Slow, even. I froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My heart beat against the dirt floor as if trying to dig its own escape. The lantern went out. For a second, I thought he had gone. I almost believed it, until I heard breathing. Not mine. Not outside. Through the thin gap between the boards came a low, wet breath, so close I could feel its warmth against my ear. I stayed still, every muscle locked. He is right there. The wall trembles with each breath. I can smell the damp fabric of his coat. The air is so thin, it feels like water. One step backward would make the floor creak. One sound would tell him exactly where I am. Then silence. When the light returns, it floods the cracks again, brighter than before. But the breathing is gone. The fog outside has swallowed everything. I left the mountain at sunrise. I never went back for my things. In the city, people hang lanterns in windows as decoration every October, and I try not to look, but sometimes I do. And every Halloween night, without fail, there are 3 soft knocks on my apartment window. I keep the note in my drawer, the one that said every year, I welcome the new one. The paper still smells faintly of oil and smoke. Listen to this one, Jenna said, holding up her phone as we turned off the main road. It says, perfect for disconnecting. No cell service. No neighbors except an old man at the end who never leaves his house. I glanced at her, then at the narrowing dirt path ahead. The trees thickened fast, branches forming a ceiling that blocked the late October sun. We had booked the cabin to escape the usual Halloween chaos. No parties. No candy. No noise. Just the two of us. A few flashlights. And an idea that we could experience something old. Something closer to how the holiday used to be. Firelight. Hand-carved masks. Shadows in the trees. The place was tucked at the end of a sloping trail near Hollow Ridge, past a tree that looked like it had been hollowed out by time itself. Locals called it the Hollow Tree. When we passed it, the air changed. Cooler. Stiller. Like sound didn't travel as far back there. We reached the cabin just before sunset. The front porch leaned a little, and the windows were clouded with age. But it had a charm that matched the vibe we were chasing. Jenna laughed as she stepped out of the car. This is it. This is Halloween, from before Halloween got marketed. And woes, that night, we lit a fire in the yard pit, just a few yards from the tree line. The smoke curled upward like the cabin was breathing. I was halfway through poking the logs when Jenna froze beside me. "Someone's there," she whispered. I looked up. Past the fire, under the pines, stood a figure, tall, motionless, facing us. The mask was white and rough cut, like paper hardened into shape by glue and time. He did not move, just watched. The fire cracked behind me, but everything else was still. "Probably a costume," Jenna said quietly. "Someone getting into the Halloween spirit early." I didn't answer. My stomach tightened. There was something about the way he stood, like he didn't care if we saw him or not. Like this wasn't a performance. The next morning, we tried to laugh it off. Over coffee. I told her, "Bet it's that old guy from the listing. Maybe he gets a kick out of scaring renters." Jenna shrugged. "Well, if he wants to play weird neighbor, at least he's committed." And later that day, we drove into Hollow Ridge, a tiny town where the shops still used hand-painted signs and the clerk at the general store looked like he'd been carved out of bark. When we asked about the trail near the hollow tree, he didn't smile. "You're staying out there," he said. "Don't go past the hollow." He rubbed his jaw like the words tasted bitter. "That old man's been putting on the same mask every Halloween for as long as I've been here, even when no one's watching. This is tame Marfor." That night, we walked back toward the hollow tree just before dark. The trail was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. Halfway down the path, Jenna stopped and bent to pick something up. It was a mask, the same kind we'd seen the night before. Someone had placed it gently in the middle of the trail, facing the cabin. "Okay, that's creepy," I admitted. Jenna just looked at it for a long time, then said, "Maybe someone's setting up a local tradition, like reverse trick or treating." I didn't say anything else. We went back inside, locked the doors, and turned on every light. Around 9, we heard the creak of wood outside, the slow kind, like someone pacing back and forth on the front porch. I opened the door fast, trying to catch whoever it was, but no one stood there. Just the fog settling low and the distant flicker of our dying fire. The next morning, there was another mask. This one was hanging from the porch handle, tied with a short length of twine. Beneath it was a folded note. It read, "Wear it when the time comes." I stared at the handwriting for a long time. It wasn't old or messy. It was careful, like someone took their time crafting that sentence. "This is all just local flair," Jenna said. "They're trying to keep Halloween weird." I kind of respect it. Linga. I wanted to agree. I really did. But something about it made my chest feel too tight, like the air around us had started paying attention. On the morning of the 31st, Jenna was already dressed when I woke up. She stood near the window, arms folded, staring at the woods. "We should leave," she said quietly, like the idea had been sitting with her all night. I didn't argue. We packed fast, not bothering to fold anything. When we stepped outside, the fog was lower than before, thick and still. And then we saw them, the masks, dozens of them hanging from branches that lined the path to the road, swaying gently though there was no wind. They were all the same kind, handmade. Some painted red around the eyes, some left blank. Is this supposed to be a warning or a welcome? I muttered. Jenna didn't answer. Her hand gripped mine tight enough to sting. We didn't see any other people. No parked cars, no tire tracks. Just a trail of masks that led back toward the hollow tree. I yelled. Once. Loud and sharp. My voice echoed, then faded, and from somewhere deeper in the trees came a short, rough laugh. One voice, low and distant, like it came from inside something hollow. We grabbed our flashlights, locked the cabin behind us, and started walking. Hollow Tree Trail was our only path out, and it felt like it had grown since we first arrived. The air was heavy. Every few minutes we heard that same knock, knock, knock. Always, 3 times. Always close, but never visible. When we made it to the gas station near the edge of town, the tension didn't lift right away. The clerk behind the counter looked up, eyes darting between us like he knew where we had been. You two just come from up near the hollow? He asked. We nodded. He said nothing else. But his hands were busy. He was folding something small on the counter. A piece of stiff white paper. As we left, I looked back through the glass and saw what it was. Another mask, half folded, resting next to the register. Jenna said nothing for the first 10 minutes of the drive. Then, without looking at me, she whispered, We're not really safe yet, are we? Just setting weight. I didn't know how to answer. That night, back at my apartment in the city, I left every light on. The place felt too quiet. I kept looking toward the front window, expecting movement where there should be none. Just before midnight, the wind chimes on the porch started to ring. But there was no wind. I opened the door. The street was empty. No footsteps. No shadows. But hanging from the doorknob was a fresh mask. The same design. And taped beneath it was a note. It is time. I turned back inside slowly. Jenna was standing in the middle of the living room, perfectly still. She was wearing the mask we had found on the trail. Her arms were at her sides, her posture straight and strange. Jenna, I asked. She didn't move. I stepped closer. Her breathing was quiet, steady, but her eyes behind the mask did not follow me. I reached out, touched her arm. No reaction. I said her name again, louder. She did not answer. I backed away. My heart thudded in my throat, every beat sharp and rising. I was no longer sure who was standing in front of me, or if Jenna had ever truly come back with me at all. After that Halloween, we stopped talking about it. Jenna never remembered what happened. Not really. She would vanish for one night every year, and always return with no explanation, acting like nothing had happened. I do not ask anymore. I keep the masks in a locked box, but last year, I found them scattered across the living room floor. I had not touched them. No one had, or maybe someone had. The road into Black Hollow was narrower than I remembered. Drier. 2. The fields on either side were cracked from months without rain, and the grass had thinned to yellow threads. It was the kind of October that felt scraped bare, not cold, just emptied out. I pulled into the driveway of my mother's house around noon. The funeral had been the day before. I should have come sooner. I told myself I had reasons, but none of them sounded real once I stepped out of the car and looked at the porch. This town always had strange customs. People liked to say Halloween here was not a holiday but a responsibility. Everyone wore costumes. Sure, but no one said a word when they passed each other on the street. No laughter. No greeting. Like everyone had agreed to be someone else for a while. I grew up here. I left when I was 17. Coming back, I felt like I had walked into a dream I used to have. The kind where everything looks the same, but the air tastes different. I said aloud, I'm home, Mom. And the silence after that stretched too long. On the way in, I had passed a stretch of fence with paper dolls stuck to the posts. Little human shapes, all cut from rough paper. Each one wearing a scrap of dark cloth like a funeral outfit. One of them had eyes drawn too close together and a smudged red mouth. I remembered something my mother once told me when I was little. She said, "If you see a paper doll with the face drawn wrong, don't touch it. That means someone's saying goodbye." Dew wasn't fraying. Inside the house, the air was stale, like it had been holding its breath. I opened a few windows, though the wind did not bother to come in. The living room still looked the same. Faded couch, floral curtains, a bookshelf that leaned a little to the left. Her cane was still beside the chair. I started packing up old clothes and linens. In one drawer I found something strange. A small black dress, the kind you'd put on a doll or a child. Folded neatly beside it was a veil, made from old lace. Later that afternoon, someone knocked at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Teller, the neighbor from 2 houses down, holding a basket of bread. She looked me over and said softly, "Make sure you light a lantern tonight. It helps them find their way." "And ever into champs?" I asked who them was. She just handed me the basket and said, "This house was hers for a long time. It still remembers her." Then she walked off without waiting for a reply. That evening, just after sunset, I placed a small lantern on the porch and lit the candle inside. I don't know why I listened to her. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was more alone than I thought. Around 9, I noticed something strange in the yard. Another paper doll. This one was larger, with more detail. The hair was drawn in gray pencil. The dress matched the one I had found earlier. And across one cheek was a red diagonal line, like a scar. It looked like my mother. I picked it up, stared at it too long, then threw it into the trash bin behind the shed. I didn't want it in the house. I didn't want to think about who had placed it there. The next morning, it was back, sitting upright on the armrest of my mother's chair like it had always belonged there. I stood still for a long time, staring at it. My coffee went cold in my hand. I took it outside again, burned it this time, watched the paper curl and blacken until nothing was left but ash. That night, I kept the lights off. I didn't light the lantern. I thought maybe, if I didn't play along, it would stop. At exactly midnight, there were 3 soft knocks on the front door. Even. Measured. I stood behind the peephole, heart pounding, barely breathing. Outside stood a figure in a paper mask. The face was familiar, it looked like her. The eyes were drawn, not real. The body wore the black dress meant for a child. The figure did not move. I locked the door, stepped back, one hand over my mouth. I tried to call someone, anyone, but my phone would not ring through. Through the slit between curtain and window, I saw the figure lower itself onto the porch steps. It sat still, back straight, hands resting gently on its knees. Like it was waiting, like it had all the time in the world. I waited for hours, staring through the window until my eyes stung. The figure outside never moved. When dawn came, it was gone. Only a torn paper doll lay where it had been sitting, split down the middle, like someone had tried to peel it apart. I went out and picked it up. The paper felt damp, though the air was dry. For the first time since the funeral, I cried. Not from fear exactly, but from something heavier. I realized how little I had understood about my mother, about the quiet things she believed and never explained. That afternoon I found myself in the shed, rummaging through boxes. My hands shook when I saw her old sewing kit and a stack of faded newspaper clippings about local rituals. One of them mentioned something called the silent dressing, a night when villagers dressed as those they had lost, to keep them from wandering. The date printed at the top was October 31st. By sunset, the house felt smaller. The windows seemed to lean inward. Listening, I could hear the faint hum of insects in the dry fields beyond, a sound that had always made me sleepy as a child, but now it felt more like whispering. I lit a single candle in my mother's bedroom and placed it on her nightstand. The chair she used to sit in was beside the bed. For a moment I imagined her there, knitting or reading, humming a song that never had words. I said quietly, "I'm sorry I wasn't here." And ode. False safety settled over me like a blanket. I believed for a moment that it was over. No knocks, no dolls, just the still house and the warm light of the candle. I thought maybe I had honored her in the right way at last. I must have fallen asleep sitting up. When I woke, the candle was out. The air was cold, heavy. The moonlight through the window looked silver and flat. On the chair across from me sat a new paper doll, larger than before, its face drawn in the glow from outside. I went still, present tense now. She is sitting where my mother used to sit. Her paper face tilts toward me, one cheek marked with that same red line. I cannot breathe. My hands shake, but I cannot move them. The air between us feels alive. The doll's head turns slightly. The sound is soft but real, paper against paper. The shape of her shoulders begins to shift as though the paper is folding itself into something more human. I whisper, "Mom," and the candle flickers back to life. For a second I see her, not the doll. My mother, her eyes clear and calm, sitting exactly where she used to. Then the light goes out again, and the room is dark except for the shape in the chair. I reach forward, trembling. The space between us feels endless, though I can see her right there. My fingertips brush the armrest. It is warm. Then the warmth moves. The chair creaks as if someone rises from it. A weight passes by me, invisible but close enough that the air presses against my skin. I cannot see her, but I feel her hand rest on my shoulder. Morning came quietly. I was sitting on the floor. The candle burned to a stub. The chair was empty, but on the table, beside it, lay a new paper mask, freshly made, the edges smooth and clean. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply sat there, feeling the mark of her touch still warm on my shoulder. When I finally looked in the mirror, the mask was already on my face. I did not remember putting it there. I kept it. I could not throw it away. Every Halloween since, I light one candle and put on the mask before the first knock comes. No one visits anymore. But I know that if I forget, if I leave it dark and wait too long, the one sitting on the porch will return. And this time, she will want to come inside. "Just keep them moving and don't let anybody double back," May said, adjusting her scarf as she handed out flashlights to the kids. "And for the love of God, no shortcuts through yards." Devin and I exchanged a look, half amused, half unsure what we had gotten ourselves into. We were only here to help. Just 3 volunteers guiding kids door to door for Halloween. It was a crisp night, the kind that made every leaf crunch louder than it should. The group had split into smaller clusters to cover more ground, each with an adult watching from behind. I walked ahead with Devin, while May stayed behind to wrangle the stragglers. The houses along Main Street were glowing and busy, orange lights in every window, and plastic skeletons bobbing in the breeze. "Looks like the town really leans into it," Devin said. I nodded. It was the kind of place where Halloween still felt local, like everyone agreed to make it count. Even the older houses had jack-o'-lanterns on every step. But once we turned onto the east end of the neighborhood, everything changed. No porch lights, no cobweb decorations or witch hats or motion-activated spiders. Just a row of dark houses and a long stretch of cracked sidewalk leading toward the woods. "Is this the haunted zone?" Devin asked with a crooked grin. "Did we wander into the movie set part?" May didn't answer right away. She just said, "Let's not go down that street. Trust me." "Isn't Dilta doing?" "Of course." That was when one of the girls, the one in the red cloak, tugged at my sleeve and pointed down the block. Her voice was soft, but she said it like it was perfectly normal. "That's where the Candyman lives. He doesn't like lights, so he keeps his house dark. But he already invited me." "Thank you for watching." I crouched beside her. "What do you mean he invited you?" She blinked, like I was the one missing something obvious. He told me. Said I could have one piece if I eat it right away. We can see. I looked down the road again. At the end stood a house that looked more like a shed. Half the roof had caved in, and the yard was buried in brown leaves. But in the center of it all sat a bright plastic bowl, full of wrapped candy, sitting perfectly still on a cracked stone slab. No one lives there, May said firmly. We're skipping it. Easing, indeed easing. Why, indeed. That should have been the end of it. But one of the boys, Tommy, I think, darted forward before we could stop him. He grabbed a piece from the bowl and grinned like he had won something. Devin reached out to stop him, but it was too late. The wrapper was already in his hand, empty. He told me to eat it fast so I could go in, Tommy said, holding the wrapper like it meant something. My skin prickled cold. Who is he? I asked. Where is he? And Weldane's 75. Tommy pointed to the window of the house. I saw nothing, just sagging curtains in the shape of a rusted lantern hanging inside. Devin muttered. Nobody's been in that house for years. But the candy bowl sat full, clean, and untouched, like someone had set it out just minutes ago. We took the kids and moved on. No one else touched the candy. But when we circled back near the end of the night, I looked again. The bowl was full. Exactly the same. And Tommy swore he saw someone wave from behind the curtain. I went back a third time, alone. This time, the bowl was gone, or so I thought. It had been moved to the other side of the lawn, just sitting there in the dirt, untouched. I picked it up. It was heavy, full again. But when I looked inside, every piece was wrapped in the same plain paper, like it had just been made. And the oddest thing, the paper was warm. May was shaking when we got back to the rec center. She kept wiping her hands on her jeans like something was stuck to them. I didn't think anyone would go near that place, she said. Last year, my cousin joked about knocking on that door. He never came home. Is Rever. I felt something twist inside me. Devin and I looked at each other, then back at her. You mean he ran away? I asked, already knowing that wasn't what she meant. May didn't answer, just stared at the floor. I drove us back out toward the edge of town. I didn't tell them I was going to stop at that house again. I needed to see it one last time, to make sure nothing was following the kids or waiting for another chance. Devin didn't try to stop me. May didn't speak the entire drive. When we turned the corner onto that same dark stretch, the air seemed thinner, like every breath was pulling something from deeper underground. The house was still there, shadowed and broken, but the lantern inside flickered faintly like a dying heartbeat. On the porch sat the bowl, full again, unmoved, untouched. I got out of the car and walked toward it. The leaves didn't crunch under my feet. They shifted, quietly, like they were trying to keep me from being heard. Devin called out behind me, "Do you see anyone?" But I didn't answer. I stepped onto the porch and looked through the broken window. Inside, the house was not empty. Present tense now. The smell hits me first, like burnt sugar mixed with glue and rust. My eyes adjust, and I see the walls. They are covered in masks. Not Halloween masks. Not store-bought, but faces. Childlike. Familiar. Drawn on paper. Taped in rows, as if someone was trying to remember every kid who ever walked past. There is a girl's face I recognize. Casey Wilmer. She used to sit behind me in 9th grade. Her family moved, or so I was told. But now her face is on the wall, and her name is scrawled beneath it in thick, crooked ink. In the center of the room is a candy jar, the same as the one outside. Inside each wrapper is something small. A button, a thread, a tiny braid of hair. One has a cracked fingernail curled inside. Another holds the corner of a school ID card. I want to scream. I want to run. But all I can do is step backward, breath shallow and cold. The lantern above me buzzes once, then goes out. and I hear a voice, soft and close, as if someone is speaking just behind my left ear. Want to be neighbors. And if we're quiet, I spin, but there is no one there. Just the cold, just the dark, just the wall of faces looking back at me. We left that night. None of us spoke during the ride home. May left town a week later. Devin moved out of our apartment by winter. But 2 days after Halloween, I found a box on my desk. No return address. Inside was a candy bowl, the same shape, the same weight. I threw it out. It came back the next morning, this time on the kitchen counter. The wrappers were warm again, and every Halloween since. When the night turns quiet, I see it, that red lantern glow from the edge of my street, waiting. The street was quiet in a way that made it feel older than it was. Just a single row of houses tucked against a tree line on the edge of town, with no sidewalks and no traffic. People kept to themselves here. They waved when you moved in, then went back to trimming hedges and closing blinds. I was Alex, 33, and 3 months into owning my first home. Bought it in August when the prices dropped and the sky still held summer. I thought I was getting peace. Finally, somewhere away from sirens and streetlights. I never expected Halloween to be the thing that changed how I saw this place. Most houses on the block had some kind of decoration out front. Pumpkins, fake spider webs, the usual, all except one. The house at the very end of the cul-de-sac stayed dark every night, windows covered, yard untouched. I asked a neighbor once, and they just said, "Oh, that place. No one really goes over there. Very down of thing." I figured maybe someone elderly lived there, or someone sick. No big deal. But as the month turned colder and the decorations multiplied, that house stayed the same. Like it didn't belong to the same calendar the rest of us were living in. Just to be safe, I installed motion lights and a front-facing security camera. I had heard stories of kids egging houses or pulling Halloween pranks. I did not want to wake up November 1st to shaving cream on the windows. The camera was mostly for peace of mind. On the morning of October 30th, I checked the footage from the night before, mostly out of habit. The timestamp read 3:12 a.m. My porch was empty for most of it. But then, a frame shift. Someone was standing right at my doorstep. They were tall, still, almost blending into the dark. The light should have come on, but it didn't. The motion sensor had not triggered. No footsteps, no sound, just a figure, facing the door. I replayed it 3 times. Each time, the same image. They stood there for 15 seconds, then vanished from one frame to the next. Not walked away, just gone. That afternoon, I asked a few neighbors about it. One of them, a man named Craig, who walked his dog past my house every morning, narrowed his eyes when I mentioned the time. 3:12, he said. That sounds like Otto. He used to live down there at the end. Real quiet guy. But I thought he passed years ago. It's not round. I didn't know what to say to that. Passed? I asked. Craig shrugged. They cleaned his place out a while back. Never listed it. Never sold it. Just left it alone. Is it a non? That night, I went out to clean the camera lens. It had started to get fuzzy in the cold. When I unscrewed the mount, I noticed a smear of dried mud on the base too high to be from my boots, and fresh enough to still smell faintly like wet leaves. I started checking the camera every morning, and every morning, at 3:12 a.m., the same figure appeared, closer each time. By Halloween morning, he was no longer at the edge of the porch. He was right at the door, hand raised like he was about to knock. But the bell never rang. The light never came on. Only the camera saw him. That evening, I pulled the live feed onto my television. I wanted to see it happen in real time. I told myself I could catch whoever it was, maybe scare them off. But a part of me already knew. No one else on this street remembered Otto. Not really. They all just knew not to look after dark. I sent a video clip to my friend Marcus. He had helped me install the camera and knew how the motion detection worked. A few minutes later, he called and said, "There's nothing there. Alex, the screen just goes dark for a second." But on my end, I could still see the man. Still watch him stand there, head tilted slightly toward the door, as if listening. I searched through the footage from the night before, but the file was gone. Not corrupted. Deleted. Only the thumbnail remained. A black square where the image used to be. I knew I had not erased anything. The camera had been untouched all day. I stayed up that night, not planning to sleep. I turned on every exterior light, grabbed the metal rod I used for curtain rods, and sat in the living room with the live stream projected onto the television. The clock ticked slowly toward 3. The house felt like it was holding its breath. At 3:12 exactly, the image shimmered. The man appeared again, standing still. This time his face was clearer, pale, like damp paper, and stretched too tight across his skull. His hand rested gently on the doorbell. But again, no sound. The bell stayed silent. I stood and walked to the door. Opened it. The porch was empty. The motion light stayed dark. I stepped outside, looked both ways, even checked the bushes. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the house, the glow of the TV inside caught my eye. On the screen, the man was still standing there. Same spot. Same posture. As if I had never opened the door. That was when I understood. He existed only inside the frame, but he was not imagined. The next night, I didn't sleep. I sat up with the feet again, eyes fixed. 3 o'clock came and went. No image. No movement. At 3:12, I found myself holding my breath, but nothing came. For a while, I started to think maybe it had ended. Some strange glitch. Finally gone. I stood up, stretched, walked to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. The hallway felt quiet in a way I had not felt in days. When I came back, the living room was unchanged, except for one thing. The door was open. Wide. I did not remember opening it. I looked at the TV. The feed showed the inside of the house now. I had not changed the camera angle. In the frame, standing just inside the hallway, was the same man. His hand still rested where the doorbell would have been, except now he was inside. I ran forward and yanked the plug from the wall. The screen went black. Silence returned. Then I heard a soft creak behind me. Not the door. Not the hallway floor. The kitchen window. I turned slowly. It was shut. Locked. But a fogged outline of a hand was pressed against the glass from the inside. Palm open. Fingers long and smudged. I did not move. I just sat down in the nearest chair, the metal rod still in my hand. I stared at the dark screen, no longer sure if it had ever lied. I thought about the front door, and how I could not remember if I had locked it. I took down the camera the next morning, threw out the motion light. I sleep during the day now, try to stay up through the night. No electronics, no lenses, but every time the clock hits 3:12, I stop what I am doing. I listen, and sometimes, just faintly, I hear the hum of a light that should not be on. The road to Heller's Gap narrowed as we climbed, the trees leaning in like they wanted to listen. Milo sat beside me in the passenger seat, flipping through a pamphlet he had printed weeks ago. It says they still do Halloween like it was done 200 years ago. He said, real masks, no candy, no plastic, no music, just tradition. Here's their next way. I was mostly along for the ride. Milo had a thing for old festivals, the kind that made you feel like the air remembered something. I liked how excited he got, even if these trips usually ended with bug bites and cold showers. I didn't expect anything more than that. When we pulled into the village, it was nearly dusk. The buildings were wooden and weathered, smoke rising from stone chimneys. and people already dressed in long coats and handmade masks. A woman greeted us near the welcome fire, her eyes sharp behind layers of stitched burlap. "If you walk near the tree line, do not touch the scarecrows," she said. "There are 13. Do not count them. Do not name them, especially the 7th. I know Dyson." I laughed. I thought she was being dramatic. Milo, though, leaned in like he was hearing something sacred. "Are they part of the ritual?" he asked. She only replied, "They were our neighbors. They stayed too long. Is wasting 2 keys." That night we stayed in a guest hut made of pine slats and woolen curtains. The firewood snapped like bones in the hearth. I caught Milo staring out the window longer than I liked. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then added, "I just want to see them." They were gathered. The scarecrow stood along the path that curved into the woods, half visible even in the dim, by lantern light. We walked just far enough to count a few. Milo whispered, "There really are 13. And the 7th one is—" He didn't finish. I turned to see what had stopped him. The scarecrow he meant had a human face. Not painted. Realistic. A round face. Gray hair. Eyes made of glass that reflected the firelight like they were wet. It wore a shirt too clean to be weathered. And it leaned ever so slightly, like it had weight. We backed away. I did not say a word. Neither did Milo. Not until we were nearly back to the hut. "You saw that, right?" he said. The eyes. It was looking. "They ready?" I nodded. In the morning, I found prints. Not boot prints. Bare feet. Pressed into the damp soil, moving from the tree line to just outside our door. The same soft dragging pattern. Toe then heel. Toe then heel. I wanted to believe it was a prank. I wanted to believe it was part of the atmosphere. Some village theater meant to keep outsiders on edge. But when we walked past the scarecrows again that afternoon, the 7th had turned. Just slightly. But it now faced our path. Head tilted toward the guest hut. That night, I closed the shutters tight. Milo sat with his back to the wall, arms around his knees. Neither of us said much. The sounds outside grew louder as the festival began. Singing in a language I did not know. Drums that sounded like heartbeat. Bells strung on wrists. Just before midnight, Milo said, "Don't count them." That's what she said. "Right. Thinks that he is this clash." I didn't answer. I just stared at the shadows pressed against the window, all 13 of them now taller than I remembered. By the time the village drums faded, the night had gone thick and cold. The moonlight turned the field silver, and the line of scarecrows at the edge of the woods looked like a row of people waiting to be called. I did not see Milo leave the hut. I only noticed when I turned and found the door open, swinging slightly in the wind. I shouted his name. No answer. The only sound was the dry rustle of straw from somewhere down the hill. I grabbed my lantern and ran, the flame bending sideways as I moved. The festival fire burned in the distance, but the woods were darker than I expected, the ground soft and uneven beneath my shoes. The 7th scarecrow was gone. Its post stood empty, rope frayed, the straw scattered across the leaves. I followed a narrow path into the trees until I saw something pale hanging from a low branch. It was Milo. His ankle was caught in a tangle of vines and thorns, his body limp and scratched. I pulled him down, shouting his name again and again until his eyes fluttered open. "Ethan," he whispered. It was watching me. In Nasco, I turned, and there it was. Present tense now. The scarecrow stands a few yards away, taller than any man, its head tilted to one side. The mask of straw and mud glistens in the lantern light. Its arms twitch, a slow bend, like it is remembering how to move. I feel my throat close. I take a step backward, dragging Milo behind me. It moves again. Not walking, sliding. The sound is like wet rope being pulled through soil. The air smells of smoke and rot. I lift the lantern higher. and for a second, its face shifts. Under the straw, I see human skin, burnt and pale. I pull Milo up and we run. Branches whip across our arms, roots grab at our feet, but I don't stop. Every time I look back, I see a shape between the trees. It's still upright, still following. The path seems longer than before, as if the forest is stretching itself to keep us inside. We burst from the woods onto the road that leads to the village. People are waiting there, holding torches and shouting. An old woman waves her arms. "Do not let it cross," she cries. They form a wall of flame at the forest edge. I drag Milo toward them, heart pounding so hard it hurts. Behind us, the scarecrow hesitates at the light. It trembles, shoulders heaving like breath. Then it steps forward. The villagers throw hay soaked in oil, and fire races across the ground. The thing catches, flailing, pieces of straw turning to sparks that scatter into the wind. It does not scream. It only tilts its head one last time, facing us, even as the fire eats through it. Then it collapses. The night swallows the sound. We stayed in the village until dawn. No one spoke of what happened. By morning, there were 13 scarecrows again along the path, each standing exactly where it had before. The 7th post held something new, a shape roughly the same height as Milo, wrapped in a scorched coat and tied neatly with twine. We left that day. Milo never talked about it. His ankle scars never healed clean, small rings of rough skin circling both legs. Sometimes he wakes in the night whispering, "Don't count them. Is not 2 ways south too wide?" And I do not, because I know if I ever try, one of them will turn its head again. I moved in with just a suitcase, a fan, and a pot for pasta. It was all I had left after the divorce. And honestly, it felt like enough. The apartment was small, 2nd floor, 1 bedroom, windows that creaked when you opened them. But the rent was cheap and the neighbors minded their own business, which was exactly what I needed. The woman who lived here before me had died in August. Her name was Eleanor, and no one seemed to know much else. When I asked the property manager, he just said, she was old, didn't go out much. There was something careful in his tone, like he was trying not to step on a memory. I found the tin on my 2nd night. It was in the back of the kitchen cabinet, tucked behind a row of mismatched cups. A small round box, old but clean, with a silver latch and the name Eleanor etched faintly across the top. Inside was a simple pendant on a black cord. I left it on the counter and added it to the pile of return-to-office items. I figured someone in the main office would know what to do with it. That night, I came home from a walk and found the tin open on my dining table. I hadn't touched it. No one else had a key. My name is Grace. I am 35, and I never believed in things like haunted houses or lingering spirits. But there is something about sitting in the same chair where someone else used to sit. Something about finding their things exactly where they left them. That makes you quieter. It makes you listen. I brought the tin downstairs the next morning, handed it directly to the manager and said, "This must have been hers." He nodded and took it without comment. For a moment I thought I saw his hand shake. That evening, I came back from the grocery store and found it again, hanging neatly from my door handle, the pendant tied in a perfect bow. I touched it once. The cord was warm. I knocked on my neighbor's door, a retired teacher named Sheila who had lived here the longest. When I asked if Eleanor had any family, she shook her head slowly. No children. No siblings. That pendant was all she ever wore. Then she paused. She used to say this apartment was her last friend. Right in, and I save prof for Marnos Nandais. The words made my stomach twist. I tried to forget it. Told myself the manager had mixed things up. Maybe returned it by mistake. I left the pendant on the shelf and got back to work, pretending everything felt normal. The next night, I found a folded note beneath it. Just one line, written in a soft, looping hand. You promised to keep it for me." I didn't remember promising anything, but when I picked up the tin, it felt heavier than before. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the pendant, resting quietly on the shelf, or not resting at all. I got up around 3 and moved it into a drawer, then pushed the drawer shut with more force than necessary. The silence after that felt deeper than before, like the apartment was holding its breath. The next morning I took the tin and drove it across town. I waited until the market behind the church got busy, then slipped around back and dropped it in the dumpster. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, listening, but nothing happened. By noon I had talked myself out of the whole thing. The air smelled like fall, and the neighbor's dog barked at the mailman, and I was sure the apartment felt lighter. I made tea, opened a window, even started a list of things to do for the weekend. For once, I felt okay being alone. That night, I turned off the lights early and crawled into bed with a podcast playing low. I woke up sometime after 1, throat dry, and wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water. I opened the cupboard to grab a clean glass and froze. The tin was sitting there, front and center, its lid closed but not latched, as if it had just been placed. I stared at it for a full minute before reaching up. My hands trembled. I sat down at the table, opened the tin. Inside was something new. A Polaroid photo, old and slightly curled at the edges. It showed the back of someone's head. Mine, sitting right where I was now. Same chair, same table. I could see my own shoulder in the picture, the curve of my neck. I did not scream. I cried. Not out of fear, but something else. Guilt, maybe. Or the sudden weight of knowing someone had loved this place so much that they stayed, that they waited for someone to remember them. "I'll keep it," I whispered. I set the tin gently back on the shelf, closed the lid, and this time, I didn't try to hide it. I stopped trying to return the pendant after that. No one else needed to know why. I still lived alone, but I no longer felt alone. I started speaking aloud when I came home. Just small things. "It's raining today." Or "That soup turned out better than I thought." Nothing strange happened after that. But every Halloween, without fail, I waked to a folded note on my kitchen table. The same soft handwriting. Always one line. "Thank you. It's a little warmer this year." I was only supposed to stay for a week. My friend Luke owned the trailer and needed someone to watch it while he drove his mom down to Florida. I had just separated from my wife and didn't have anywhere better to be. So I said yes. The trailer sat 2 miles off the main road, on a narrow patch of gravel that curved up into the Appalachian woods. No neighbors in sight, no signal, and barely enough water pressure to rinse a plate. The quiet hit different out there. Too wide, too slow, like sound had a longer way to travel. There was one other person nearby, a man named Hicks, who lived about a mile downhill in a rusted trailer that looked like it had been forgotten by the world. I met him on my second day. He was standing in the weeds with a rake and a flashlight that flickered in the wind. "You staying up there for Halloween?" he asked. I told him yeah, just a few more nights. He squinted, then said, "Don't shine your light toward the trees. They don't like it." Bend it. NSB. I waited for a smile that never came. I just nodded and told him I'd keep it low. That night, I checked the locks and stepped outside to smoke. The forest was still. Cold air pressed low to the dirt, and the only light I used was a narrow-beamed flashlight I kept in my coat. I clicked it toward the woods once, just once, and swore I saw something shift. Not an animal. Something too slow for that. I turned the beam away and stepped back inside. Over the next few nights, I started hearing it. A soft engine sound, somewhere in the distance, always between 1 and 2 in the morning. No headlights, no gravel crunch, just the low rumble of a car that stopped right where the trees began. Then silence. I called the county sheriff's office. The deputy who picked up just sighed. "You're staying near Hicks, right?" I said yes. He said, "He reports that same thing every year. We go out. We never find a car. Call it now." One night, I heard the engine again. This time I stood with the flashlight at the back window and waited. Something moved between the trunks. A shape, hunched and still. I flicked the light toward it, and the beam sputtered. Not dead, just unwilling. The next morning, I tested the flashlight again. It worked fine, but when I pointed it back toward the woods, it began to flicker again, always toward the same direction, the same patch where Hicks's place would be if the trees weren't so thick. By the time Halloween night came, I had stopped sleeping well. My thoughts tangled somewhere between loneliness and nerves. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that Hicks was just old and spooked by the woods, that I had stayed up too late, stared too long. But at 2:07 a.m., I heard it again. Not the engine this time. A light scrape along the outer wall. The sound was small, deliberate, like fingers tracing metal. I grabbed my flashlight and my knife from the counter. The air felt heavier than it had any right to be. I flicked the light on and stepped toward the door. Through the window I saw a shape crouched low near the siding. Its back was turned, shoulders hunched, one hand pressed flat against the wall. I opened the door just enough to call out, "Hey," I said. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer. Present tense now. The beam hits the dirt beside it. The light sputters again. The figure straightens, slow as a breath. I take one step back, the flashlight trembling in my hand, and then the light goes out completely. I lunge forward, sweeping the beam until it catches again. Nothing there. Only a smear of mud on the wall. A handprint, wide and human. I touched it with my fingertips. The mud was still wet. I locked every door after that. Sat down in the corner with my back to the wall, the flashlight beside me, waiting for morning. But I couldn't stop thinking about Hicks, about what he said they don't like the light. I wondered who he meant by they self. By sunrise, I decided to walk to his trailer. The air was cold enough to sting. My boots left clear prints on the gravel road. Halfway there, I noticed tire marks veering off into the woods, deep and fresh, ending where no road existed. I turned back. Each step felt heavier. The woods pressed closer, the sound of my own movement growing too loud. That was when I heard a second set of steps. Slow, careful, behind me. I spun and raised the flashlight. Dead again. The bulb flickered once, then dimmed out completely. Something moved in the trees. Not running, not hiding, matching my pace. Every time I stopped, it stopped too. I could hear the drag of feet through leaves, the breath of someone too close to see. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms as I stumbled down the slope toward the clearing. My lungs burned, but I didn't look back. The flashlight slipped from my hand and hit the ground hard, sparking as it rolled. The beam snapped on, strong and white. It caught a face. The mask was pale plastic, streaked with dirt, the shape of a grin molded into it. The man wearing it smelled of gasoline and cold air. His hand shot forward and caught my arm, squeezing until I dropped to my knees. I kicked hard. The sound he made wasn't human, more like air escaping a pipe. I swung with all my weight, hitting him with a rock until he stumbled backward. Then I ran again, half blind, half bleeding, crashing through brush and thorns. When I fell into the clearing, the flashlight rolled beside me and stayed lit. I looked back once. The masked man stood at the edge of the trees, unmoving, his head tilted slightly, as if he was studying the light itself. I crawled back to the trailer, slammed the door, and locked every bolt I could find. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the flashlight. For the first time since I got there, I left every lamp on until dawn. I left the mountains the next day, sold my truck, packed my things, and never looked back. I sleep with the lights on now. Luke told me later that his security camera had recorded everything. He offered to show me. Said he saved it on a USB drive. I told him to keep it locked away. I never wanted to see that light flicker again.